District 3 is in front of us. We appreciate these folks coming up. I think you folks are starting to get a little idea now. We're kind of getting ramped up there at the end, so I think we'll definitely have to have some fun come this fall. So want to welcome you all for being here. Thanks for being here tonight. I'm going to stand over here so that I'm not talking to folks standing behind me. So Bob Nonini, thanks for being here. Bob just completed his first term in the Senate. He had 4 terms in the House, during which he served as the House Education Chairman. He works in the financial, consulting, and insurance industry. Bob, thanks for being here tonight. Pat Whalen. Pat, thanks for being here tonight. A businessman out of Post Falls. Describes himself as a political newcomer, works in the software industry. So, Pat, thanks for being here tonight as well. Ron Mendive just completed his first term, House Seat A. Ron, thanks for being here. He says he's semi-retired, but he also says he stays very busy, so he's not sure just how retired he is. So, Greg Gfeller is here this evening. There he is, over there. Greg, thank you for being here. Works for the Avista Corporation as the Director of Operations, lives in Post Falls. Jeff Ward, thank you for being here this evening. Works in the textbook publishing business, has a public relations and a consulting firm. We are missing one tonight. Don Cheatham, a retired police officer from Southern California, has the flu. So on one hand, we're very sorry he's not here. On the other hand, we're glad he's not here, spreading it around. So if you see Don, wish him good health.
Terry Warner.
Oh, Terry, I'm sorry. Terry Warner. I saw you sitting there. You're in the hot seat. That's where all the good questions come from. Terry Warner running for the House as well. Seat A or B? Remind me. A. Very good. Thank you for being here tonight. And these two gentlemen to my immediate left will be our discussion leaders tonight. Tom Green is communications specialist here at North Idaho College. He is a recovering journalist, having worked at the Coeur d'Alene Press, and recovering from working to the man on his left, the chief editor here, Mike Patrick. And Mike, I'm going to turn the time over to you. You gentlemen have 30 minutes on the clock, so enjoy.
Thank you, Mark. And the first question tonight is going to go to Kerner Furniture. And my question is, after having politicians and journalists sit in this furniture for a couple of hours, is the furniture going to be discounted, or are you going to have to give it away? Okay, and that's it for me tonight. Tom?
Good job. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us in Mark's living room. But I've got a real easy question, I think. This is such a unique setting, and it's, there's so many stuffy debates that I'd like you to just start off by saying, what do you bring to the table that makes you a more qualified candidate than the person you're running against, who's sitting right here? So I'm just going to open it up. It is kind of a free-for-all environment, I think, so I'd like to just throw that out there and let you go ahead and maybe start on this side. That'd be great.
Okay, I guess I'll start. I think for me it's time on task, basically. I've spent many years being involved in the community, doing the hard work of those issues that I think are important to the community and important to me, and you'll hear we're all going to say how conservative we are. But the question is, what do you do with that? Have you been standing for those issues? Have you been supporting conservative candidates? Have you been making effort in this community to translate those ideas into policy, into reality? And I think that's the distinction in my race specifically, is I've been doing that. My opponents either haven't had the time or the inclination to spend the time in the community fighting for conservative issues. So.
And if you don't mind, sure, because you guys are opponents, if we could just kind of keep it simple for the audience so they'll keep track of who's against whom here. Greg?
Okay, thank you. Greg Gfeller. I'm running against Mr. Ward and Mr. Cheatham. First of all, since Mr. Cheatham isn't here to defend himself, I think that it would behoove him if he had more experience to live in the community longer than 2 years. Mr. Ward has continually said that we should Google him and read the blogs and figure out, how he's been doing the work. So I have done that. Jeff, I think you're a great guy behind the scenes. You're a blogger. Some of the things you have to say, the way you pit different candidates against each other. I hear you use terms as the cheerleaders for the 2 city council ladies, things like this. I really don't know if that's constructive of building things up. So I also think you're a speechwriter. So I guess what I bring to the table, not to really go on the attack like I did, but is 36 years of business experience and living here for the past 18 years.
Thanks. Terry, how about you?
Hey, well, I think that, I have a unique background. I spent 31 years as a small businessman. I still own this small business here in the local area. I've also spent the last 23 years working for the city of Post Falls. I started as a meter reader, worked my way up to where now I'm over 5 different divisions. So I'm involved in planning, engineering, making sure that we have the facilities for when businesses need to come to town, we are able to take care of them. Also, I think I have some practical experience. I was elected to Post Falls City Council for a term. And then when I went to work for the city, I ran for the Post Falls Highway District. I'm on my 5th term there at the Highway District. So I understand how government operates from the inside and the outside a little bit. Thank you.
Ron?
I'm Ron Mendive. Thank you all for coming. Thanks for having us here. I bring a lot of different things to the table. This is I'm completing my 1st term, and my work background is varied. I've done so many different things. I've spent my entire life trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up, and now I'm on a different path altogether. However, mining, logging, self-employed, we developed a pellet stove, which employed a bunch of people. So all of those things, it's amazing that I've used everything down in the legislature. We tackle so many issues, so many diverse things that just come before us, all the different legislation. It's really quite varied. And so my background has helped me. I've realized as I've been down there that it helps to have a few miles on you. Maturity does help. It helps you to just make decisions. It helps you to stand for what needs to be stood for, and no matter who comes against you and why. So I bring quite a few things to the table, just by background. It's just we are part of our environment, reflect our environment, and mine has been varied, and my mission down there has been quite varied as well. So thank you.
Mr. Nonini?
Please go ahead.
Well, I echo Ron's sentiments. Thanks for coming out. I want to digress a little bit, Mike, if I can. I spent the day today working with the Boys and Girls Club nationally and my local board. It was brought to their attention something that I didn't think was much of a secret. In 2006, I got a DUI, and I was embarrassed and ashamed then, and I am now in front of you, but it wasn't particularly a secret. It's public information. I'm bringing it up because Kathy Ann Nonini wrote a letter or an email to the National Boys and Girls Club asking them to investigate me and whether I was suitable for my role as chairman of the board. So that's something the Boys and Girls Club will take up, but just wanted to bring that out so you heard it from me. I'm running because I perceive a lack of leadership in some areas that really concern me. I've been married for quite a long time to my wife Laura, and our daughter just graduated from U of I. Couldn't find an interesting job here. Our son is a junior at U of I, and he's going to intern this summer in Chicago, and I really doubt he's going to settle here after the U of I. So I'd love to see us focus much more intently on economic development. I spent part of the day today with Jay Larson of the Idaho Technology Council, and we were brainstorming on ideas for software development in this region and changing this region's identity. I'm blessed with quite a large family, and we're from coast to coast. And when you hear North Idaho, generally you get one of 2 images. Either the leftover images from Richard Butler's days, or the image that the Hagedorn Corporation has worked so hard to create of this being a beautiful resort town. Neither of those 2 images is really conducive to deciding, hey, I want to move my business there, or I want to bring jobs to this area. So I think that we need, as a community, to decide on an identity for North Idaho, and I think that we have a tremendous high-tech story to tell here, and I'd like to get to work on that. So I'll leave it at that.
Pat, we will get back to this, but I'd like to hear from Bob, please.
Yeah, thank you, and good question, Tom. I think what I bring to the table is 25 years of active involvement in the Republican Party here in Kootenai County, and if you look back at my total life history, it's probably about 45 years of active involvement growing up in Shoshone County and then moving here. Effective leadership in the Idaho House in the 8 years I served there, and the bills I've sponsored and the success that they've brought. I was the lead sponsor on bringing Cabela's to Post Falls when they were recruited by Washington. I was the lead sponsor on the early opening and development of K-Tech. I introduced Mark Kottner, who I'd met in southern Idaho, southwestern Idaho, to the group up here, and then they recruited Mark to run K-Tech. Mark has since moved back to Oklahoma. But I think Another issue that's important to me is STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And there's a charter school in Rathdrum. It's the first STEM school in the state of Idaho. And I have been very active in helping them when they got started, working with their board up there. And a couple of weeks ago in your newspaper, Mike, a little ad for the press here, I think 4 weeks ago there was a nice article about by the year 2023, 9 years from now, there'll be 2.6 million new jobs created needing someone with a STEM background or a STEM education. And Idaho ranks at the bottom of the poll when you say highest amount of minimum wage jobs. I grew up in the Silver Valley, as did Ron Mendive, and mining and logging were the main things of the economy. And they were good paying jobs, and you could get those jobs with maybe just a high school education at best. They don't exist anymore, so we want to get better paying jobs. And when businesses call Idaho, be it the Department of Commerce or a group, a chamber of commerce, they want to know what the educated workforce is like. And so what's important is to continue to work on education, the STEM. Homeschoolers do great, charter schools do great, which are part of the public education system, and private schools do great. And if we can expand STEM, and so we are ready to take advantage of the 2.6 million jobs that will be created, maybe Idaho can get a few 100,000 of those jobs, and they're high-paying jobs. And so I want to continue the good work I've done in the previous 10 years in the legislature and just build on that and continue.
Okay. Thanks. And I'm sorry, I just have to come back to you, Pat. Reminds me a little bit of the patient going into the doctor, and the doctor starts off by saying, you've got cancer, now let's talk about everything that we need to do to help you. The patient kind of shuts off at that first message. And I'm not comparing your situation with having cancer, but can you talk a little bit more about how you introduce this? And I mean, let's get right into it. If I understood you correctly, your opponent's wife brought this issue forward, and then, guys, I'm sorry, it's time to sweat a little bit, but how do you feel about that in campaigning for a legislative seat? And are there some things in your past that you'd like to just fess up to? But Pat, would you mind?
Yeah, I was quite surprised that the Nonines want to get into the background, individual backgrounds, but what I got a call today from our executive director, Ryan Davis, who's down in San Francisco at a Boys and Girls Club convention. We do an educational thing. And he was contacted by our regional, Boys and Girls Clubs organized regionally, so the Western Region guy reached out and talked to us and said this allegation had been brought forth. This was not news to many of the people on my board, so, but it was passed along to the board today, obviously. So I don't know what more to say about it, Mike. I'm a little surprised that we went there, but here we are.
Well, let me just jump in then, since Pat is challenging me. Everyone knows about my background. I've been in public office for the last 10 years, and the Spokesman Review brings it up all the time. In fact, Pat Whalen's brought it up in a number of candidate forums. He says Google is a person's best friend, just Google Nonini. And so I think it was nothing more than Pat bringing it up a number of times, and this is, I think, the fourth candidate forum we've had, and very easy to ridicule me. People have wanted to know what Pat stands for because he hasn't said anything. All he's been able to do is criticize and ridicule, and people want to know what he stands for. And so, yes, 35 years ago, I had a past where I had an arrest that was then dismissed. I have no conviction, as Pat does on his DUI conviction. So I think Pat's running a little scared in the fact that he's quick to criticize me, and now that his 6-year-old issue is out there, he's a little nervous. So I think, maybe, Pat, you should have just kept the ridicule to yourself 4 weeks ago when you brought it up. Here than I see.
I'd have to say that 0 is a number, and when you talk about me saying Google Bob Nonini, I think 0 is the number of times I've said it, so I don't think I've engaged in any ridicule. I do have some issues with your voting record, Bob, where 2 years ago you went down and you challenged 6 sitting senators. You financed their challengers. I think that left you without a great deal of influence in the Senate.
3. It would be 3, and I'll tell you the 3 they are. It was Sean Keel, it was Dean Cameron, it was John Tippett. And I have support from the caucus. They maxed out on their contribution. I've got quotes by the pro tem, the majority leader, and the assistant majority leader, and the caucus chair. The whole Senate caucus supports me. I have built those bridges, Pat. So
Bob,
if you want to continue to criticize, let's lay out where the truth is, Pat.
Yeah, well, let's do it. You've built bridges, you say, but if you look at the Post Falls business community, many of whom, including me, who've donated to your campaigns in the past, that they're not with you this time. When you look at people like Ron Nielsen, who was the campaign chair of yours, I believe, at one time, when you look at the Governor Otter endorsed me yesterday, and that's a fairly rare and fairly serious thing that a sitting Republican governor would endorse against a sitting Republican senator.
Well,
There's a reason for that.
Guys, I appreciate this. We do have other candidates.
And I'll just finish by saying, because I
No,
support
because it's just going to go back and forth. Greg,
I would rather spend our time talking about what we're going to do about education, what we're going to do about economic development, how we're going to continue to fund NIC for workforce training. You know,
and I appreciate that,
Okay.
but I do want to get back to Tom's issue, and that is, how are you different? How are you different from your opponent?
I don't have a record. I paid my bills. I'm a conservative person.
Okay?
I don't have a record either. I mean, I think the personal stuff is the reason why really good people don't run in politics. I didn't really understand until I started running how hard this is, and how nasty people get, and how untruths and rumors occur, and half-truths. And so it's amazing to me that we have anybody running, that we have good people running, because we have turned the system into such a lack of focus on the realities of people's records and the realities of people's qualifications and what they stand for and what they've done, and we focused on the personalities of the issue and any foibles that we've made in the past. Well, in my book, there's only been one perfect human being in the history of the world. So to ask a political candidate to be perfect is ridiculous.
You're referring to Mike Ditka?
But Jeff, you know, I think you got to pay your taxes. We had a representative that didn't pay their taxes. He finally got removed from office. I don't know if you're trying to continue that or what the deal is.
Do you know what the reality of that situation was, Greg?
No, but we can talk about it.
I'd be happy to.
Okay.
In 2006, I filed my taxes. I filed my state tax and my federal tax. I do it every time with TurboTax. I don't have a big income, so I don't have an opportunity I don't go to an accountant. The state tax didn't go through for some reason. The federal tax went through fine. Fast forward 3 years later. Had no idea I did not file a 2006 taxes. I get a call from the state tax commission, says, Jeff, you didn't file a 2006 taxes. Not only did you not file a 2006 taxes, we got your federal tax return, and we made a determination of what taxes you owed, and then we added penalties and interest. Fine. I said, I'm sorry. They filed a lien because it was 3 years in arrears. I said, I'm sorry. I'm happy to pay my taxes. I can't pay you a full amount, so I did a payment program, like any good citizen does when they can't pay the full amount. And that's the sum of my tax problems. So, I mean, for you to attack me on that without knowing,
I Googled the internet. That's what you asked me to do.
Well, learn that the internet that doesn't always tell the truth. You might come to the person that is being attacked and ask them personally.
This is starting to sound more and more like a living room discussion in the Patrick household. We don't want to go there.
Okay.
But Terry and Ron?
Yeah, I'd like to bring up that in the 23 years I've been in business with the city of Post Falls, one of the things I have to do is be willing to listen, because we have developers in there all the time, and of course they're trying to figure out the best way they can make a buck, and to do that they don't want to pay all the city fees, and we go back and forth. But it's collaboration with those developers, with other staff members, and then coming to solutions to get everybody moving forward. And I think that's really important. done that for 23 years. I've done that on being on the Post Falls Highway District. I have extensive training and background in transportation. I think that's one of the areas that we're lacking some in the state. That, you know, we build all these brand new roads and they're really nice, but we don't put any money aside for 20 years from now when they're going to need to be fixed. And I think that's an issue we really need to look at. I did find it rather interesting, you know, Senator Nonini and Representative Mendive have these really nice billboards that they've put up, and it looks like they're a team. So I went online and I did a little bit of checking. I looked at about 40, 50 pieces of legislation. Of those, 20 of them, they voted opposite on the same exact bills. Normally it was a 35-0, 30 or 33-2, something like that. Mr. Nonini voted in favor. On the House side, it passed by a majority, but Mr. Mendive was on the minority side. And I think that's one area that you need to collaborate and try to work together, and I would hope that the other legislators that I'm down there with, that we can sit down, have a cup of coffee or a cold beer, and try to work on some of those issues and solve problems for the people here in North Idaho.
Thanks. And Ron?
Yeah, thank you. I do have a record. I have a voting record. Look at that. The Idaho Freedom Foundation recognized me as one of the more conservative legislators in both sessions I've been in. As far as the voting, I asked about that as well, because what they do in the Senate is they roll the vote. We vote differently in the House. In the House, we have a board. Each person votes, and it's all recorded. In the Senate, if it's going to pass, rather, because they have to do a roll call vote each time. We just have a board. Voting's very, very fast in the House. So what they'll do, it's going to pass. They ask if they can just use the vote for the previous legislation on the next one. So the voting record really doesn't mean much. If it's going to pass, and I can tell you which bills are going to pass before I vote on you, if I vote against them. So they roll the vote. I learned that this year. I didn't know it last year, because last year it seemed to be more split up. But in an effort to speed up things in the Senate, that's what they do. We are a team. We actually are very conservative. We have conservative values. We stick together. On this election, and the difference between me and my opponent is quite stark. We have major ideological differences. I opposed the Obamacare with every fiber in my body. I voted against the state exchange. One of the reasons why the governor endorsed Mr. Whalen here is because he's targeted everybody that did not support him, because the governor owns that issue. Had he not supported the state exchange, it would not have happened. It is that simple. A lot of people went to the mat for him on that exchange. So that's a huge issue, and that changes America fundamentally forever. We have a president who's going to fundamentally transform America. Obamacare will do that. So we differ on how we need to fight that. I think we need to fight it every way we can. Other differences, Common Core. I oppose Common Core. I'm very concerned about the potential for federal takeover of the education system. Part of Common Core is record keeping. There are so many problems with it, but the reality is I oppose it. I can give you all the reasons. We don't have a lot of time, and it's dragging on here. And the federal lands issue is another issue that came up last time. The ticket for Idaho's prosperity is to take over the federal lands. East of the Mississippi, the states control the lands. There was a meeting here about federal lands Tuesday, first of its kind in the nation. It was called an objection process. It was a dog and pony show. They sent two people from D.C. to try to show people.
Hey, Ron, I appreciate this.
Those are differences.
And Mark, can we get a call? How much time have we got?
You spent 21 minutes and 15 seconds.
Great. So we got time for one more. And I just want to interject something. I know this has been really uncomfortable so far, but only 2 of you have a voting record. So I think the audience is getting a little more insight into the types of people we've got running for office. So I apologize for the uncomfortable nature of this, but I think it is revealing. Tom?
Yeah, well, I've got one question that a good friend of mine, family friend, wanted me to ask. He's about 60 years old. He was a logger most of his life, doesn't have a high school education. Then he moved into a printing press. He worked at a printing press for a while before he's got bad luck with industries, obviously. He got laid off a few years ago. He's got some health issues. He's got diabetes and some other health issues. He's got to take some pretty expensive medicine. Obviously, it's been about 3 years, I think, and he's having a hard time finding a job. The medicine he's taking is skyrocketing. I mean, and he thinks it's because of the Affordable Care Act. So for instance, I asked him last night, and he said one pill went from $28 a month to, I think, $250 a month, and that's just one pill. I mean, there are a lot of pills out there. But since he doesn't make an income, he's fallen in that coverage gap because Idaho chose not to expand Medicare. He's one of the 55. I read 55,000 on Medicaid. Excuse me, Idahoans who aren't covered. So he's getting it from both ends. I mean, at one end, he can't afford insurance because he doesn't make enough. And on the other end, his pills are going up so much that he can't afford them. So he wants to know what the plan is. I mean, he wants to know what we can do about this, or do we do nothing? I mean, I want to put that to y'all. I started on that side. I'd like to start over here at this side.
I think the Medicaid expansion is something that we're going to have to approach and look at that very, very cautiously before we jump on board and say, you bet, let's take the money from the federal government and expand Medicaid. But I do believe it's something that's going to have to come up next session. We're going to have to talk about it, because what happens in your uncle's case, I believe it was, yeah, he is out. But there's also indigent care that really the counties are picking up already. So one way or the other, we're paying for it. I'm just not too keen right now on jumping on board to say, yeah, let's take the federal dollars and expand Medicaid. But it will come up and it will be discussed. It's going to be a rough issue. It's one of those complex issues that you send guys like me to Boise to address.
It's not that much complex.
Okay.
Well, only because I spent 28 years in the insurance business, so I have a clear understanding of that. I've worked on legislation down there to make health care more transparent. And Idaho is one of the few states that you cannot go to a website and shop between providers to see what their rates are. But I did call a couple of places, and I'll give you a personal example of my own surgery on my knee a few years ago. I called Kootenai Medical Center, found out what the rate was. I called Northwest Specialty Hospital, found out what the rate was. My surgeon was approved at both facilities, and it was considerably less at one than the other. And so my insurance pays 80/20. So I was responsible for 20% of the remaining charges after the deductible. So then I looked at the Medicare stats that show the infection rates and the recovery rates and the satisfaction rates at facilities, and found the facility that was much less also had a much higher rating and less infection, higher patient satisfaction. And so I went to that facility and had my knee surgery done. Then my insurance company has to pay 80% of those remaining charges after the deductible. Now I would think that my insurance company would want to take the lower rate, knowing that they're going to pay 80%. And guess what? My insurance company wanted me to go to the other facility where they would pay considerably more, and so would I. And that is the problem with Idaho's healthcare system. One insurance company has a stranglehold on this state. It's Blue Cross of Idaho. And we need to address that. So I've worked on legislation that would have healthcare transparency. I've worked on legislation that would have any willing provider expanded so other facilities could be recognized under that. I've worked on legislation that we could go across state lines and shop for insurance rates. But Blue Cross of Idaho and the governor's office are so well connected and so in bed, and all you need to do is look at the sunshine reports and how much money any legislator took from the insurance industry in 2012 and the beginning of 2013 before we voted on the Affordable Care Act, and how much insurance monopoly Blue Cross of Idaho has. And until we can start to break that monopoly so we have other companies come in to make it more competitive, we're still going to have the problem that your friend has. And it's not right.
I never took a dime in 2012, so. I'm sorry.
I think voluntary purchasing pools, portability of your insurance, transparency and pricing are all important innovations. I'm not sure they speak at all to the question that was asked, which was Medicaid expansion. I agree with Greg in that I would be very reluctant to expand Medicaid. When you look at our health and welfare budget now, I believe it's over 65% of Idaho's annual budget. There is some cost savings to the counties. I know Todd Tondy brought this up at a forum earlier, that the indigent fund is extremely expensive for the county level, and if we took Medicaid, there's some possibilities of relief there. But it goes down to trusting the federal government. What is given to you with one hand today is easily taken away in the future. So I think partly it depends. If the Republicans do as well in the Senate that I'm praying that they do in November, and we're looking at maybe a wave election and maybe we're going to tear Obamacare apart, it'd be good to stay on the sidelines and see what's next, see if we can get a president in. So.
Yeah, and Medicaid expansion, it's a broken system, so why would we expand a broken system? That's the typical government solution to things. If it doesn't work now, we'll make it bigger, and maybe it might start working somehow.
Good point.
Yeah, well, the reality is there are private market solutions to all of these things, Affordable Care Act and even to Medicaid. You can do health savings accounts. You could give the people that need it a fund. You can put money in an account that they would control. The private market works in plastic surgery because it's an elective and people actually pay attention to what they're paying. The thing that's destroyed healthcare and Medicaid, because it all goes together, is the fact that there's someone else paying. When someone else pays, none of us pay as much attention to where the money's going. So what we actually need to do is give the people responsibility and make them pay a part of it. Because if you're participating in it, then you own it and you take responsibility. Otherwise, it's just someone else paying, go for it. And so we can fix these things, but government involvement is not the answer.
Thanks, Ron. Terry?
Well, I think listening to the four before me, I'd have to agree with a little bit of what all of them have said. Being in the transportation area, I can tell you at the highway district, taking government funds is always a tricky business because you don't know how long they're going to continue. And so I think that this next legislative session, it really is going to need to be looked at very closely before we agree to take on any more federal funding. I can also tell you, in working with the highway district, I can agree with Senator Nonini that having one health care provider has made it very difficult for us to keep a balanced budget and provide a service to all of our employees with only having one provider who every year it seems like they want another 10 or 15% increase.
Jeff?
I don't have a lot to add. I think in a greater sense, we have to look at healthcare in a much broader sense. I think we get fixated on this battle between state exchange, federal exchange, when everybody's in agreement that Obamacare brings negative impacts, and the Medicaid expansion is one of those aspects of Obamacare that I think in the long run is going to be disastrous, just like Obamacare. I think what we need to focus on is how do we buffer the negative impacts of Obamacare, whether or not it's ever repealed or not, which I hope it is, but we need to start buffering the impact of that in terms of pharmaceutical prices, in terms of portability, in terms of cross state lines. Senator Nonini mentioned a couple of those things that he worked on. We really need in a legislature to say we need the entire legislature to work together, whether they are for state exchange or against the state exchange, to create an Idaho buffer against the negative impacts of Obamacare and work within that framework, because we've got people hurting. I mean, I've knocked on so many doors in my district, and so many people are going through great struggles, not only medical providers, but patients who are going through a lot of the struggles and disruptions that have caused by Obamacare, even before it was enacted, changes in insurance policies and that. So I think we really need a unified front to buffer against Obamacare.
Thank you. And thank all 6 of you. Good luck to you on May 20th.